Now, let's talk about what's happening because, of course, the whole eyes of the country and the world are on the decline of big economies, ours included. But I think very few of us actually understand why it's happening. Could you give us a very simple explanation for those of us who aren't economists into what we're experiencing?
Well, I guess there is no simple explanation, but everybody seems to be blaming the Chinese. It's the Chinese fault, they say. It's the Chinese fault because the equity markets came under pressure recently and they decided to devalue their currency, and that's got a knock-on effect on just about the rest of the world. I think that is incorrect. I think closer to the truth is that the world's financial markets and the world's real economies have been in trouble for some time, in fact. And I think there were a number of imbalances in the world's economies. And I can give you many examples. A very good example is the Greeks, as an example. But certainly the Chinese contributed to this instability as well, because they had a super run on the equity markets, and there certainly was a bubble on the equity markets. Then they decided to change the exchange rate of their currency. The Americans, without a doubt, are at fault as well. Maybe the quantitative easing contributed to the bubbles that we are currently experiencing on the bond market, as example. And the South African economy is also to be blamed. We've got all sort of imbalances in our economy. We've got the current account deficit, fiscal accounts that are totally unsustainable and the like. And I think what happened in China is that was simply a trigger. That was only something that started this whole correction process. It could have happened anywhere else. It could have happened in Greece, as an example, but it started in China, and that's an important place for something like this to start because of the very high valuations on the equity markets, and suddenly their equity markets collapsed. The Chinese are very important because they are still are major commodity importing countries. Now all of a sudden the economy is probably going to slow down, impacting on economies like, for example, South Africa. But the overriding theme at the moment is that there's this massive risk aversion internationally. Nobody wants to take risk at the moment because of all of a sudden things going south everywhere. And they want to take their money away from places where there is perceived risk, like South Africa, and they want to put it at places where they feel safer, like, for example, in the United States. So what happens in the process is the money leaves South Africa and it goes to the US dollar, the rand weakens, the dollar appreciates, and so on. And in the meantime, we have really terrible economic aggregates in South Africa. The economic numbers in South Africa are not good. And if we had better economic numbers in South Africa, the outflow of capital probably would have been less, but it probably would have been an outflow of capital. The rand would have appreciated, but probably less if we had a stronger local economy, which we simply do not have. So don't point the finger to a specific country. If you want to point fingers, what I would certainly do, I would point fingers to central banks generally, not only the Chinese, and I will certainly point fingers to governments globally, including in South Africa. But I don't think it is the Chinese fault or they started the whole thing. Certainly what happened is that there's a lot of instability, and the Chinese certainly was at least just only the trigger that set the whole avalanche going.